Thank you.
This is your place?
My place.
Right on. So, where does the name come from?
Satisfied. Oh, 15 is my real name.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Appreciate you allowing us to be here. Thank you for having us out. Really appreciate it. Yeah. Thank you. It's fun.
Hey, chef.
Right on. And could we? Oh, you've got coffee up front.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll order our coffee from you. Make sure that we're caffeinated. Better Day Cafe. I like that. How long you had it?
4 years.
4 years.
Yeah.
Did you buy it from someone else?
No.
Right on. Way to go, man. I like that. And where had you lived? Okay. Right on. I'm from El Paso. So we're both from a little bit of a distance. I'm a little bit further away.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Toby.
Hey, good morning.
Thank you very much. Very kind of you. Chivalry is still alive in America. Thank you for having us out. Hey. Good morning. Good morning, Peter. Good to see you.
Good morning, everybody. It's not louder than I thought. What a great turnout. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jim Eliason. I'm the chair of the University County Democrats. And a special guest today. I spent 6 years in Congress, House of Representatives, representing the city of El Paso, Texas. A safe city where building a wall did not reduce crime, despite the claims of, you know. Anyway, he rose to national prominence and running for Senate in an amazingly close race against Ted Cruz, and now he's running for President of the United States. Please give a storm-like welcome and bienvenido a Beto O'Rourke. Thank you, Jim. Good morning. Buenos dias. So good to be here with you today. Thank you for Topi's. Thank you for opening up Better Day Cafe to all of us, especially those who came to welcome a stranger from West Texas, and also to those of you who were just innocently drinking your coffee, having your breakfast when we walked in. Sorry for the interruption, but looking forward to bringing you into the conversation as well. We got to Storm Lake 8 or 9 o'clock last night, had a quick meal, woke up this morning to a beautiful day, a little bit overcast. We just had a nice tour of the town, the different coffee shops in Storm Lake, Coffee Tree, Grand Central Station, where Cynthia said she had the best coffee of her life until she came here. So we're going to try here now as well. We stopped at Delicias to get some pan dulce. Reminds us of El Paso and back home. We met Diego, heard a little bit about his story and the story of others in this community. He was talking about a community that is thriving in large part because of immigrants who've chosen to come here, called to contribute to the success of Storm Lake, of Iowa, the United States of America, the perennial story of our country. We choose to accept it and to listen to it and tell it to ourselves and to our kids. He talked about people in his life, cousins, friends, who have the means to contribute even more, but right now don't have standing or status or citizenship to be able to contribute to their full potential. It reminds me of my hometown of El Paso, Texas, from which we bring you greetings, saludos. It's a city that I grew up in, was raised by Pat and Melissa O'Rourke, both of whom were born in El Paso. On my mom's side, folks came from Georgia and Wisconsin. On my dad's side, via the railroad, Ireland, and other places in between. But we grew up in a community that forms one half of the largest binational community in the Western Hemisphere. Ciudad Juarez, El Paso, Texas, Doñana County, and New Mexico. 3 states, Chihuahua, Texas, and New Mexico, come together in 1.3 million, joined, not separated by the Rio Grande River, forming something far more powerful, far greater than the sum of their parts or the number of people. El Paso, one of, if not the safest cities in the United States of America today. Safe not despite the fact that we are a city of immigrants and asylum seekers and refugees from the world over, to include Mexico and Central America, but Syria and Africa and Asia, everywhere, have found a home in our community. Called to us, yes, they came to do better for themselves and for their kids, that's for sure. they also call to do better for all of us. Call to this idea and this experiment of America contributing their part to, not taking from, the American dream. And they have, and that's the story of our success and our strength, and yes, our safety and our security. But I didn't always understand it or see it that way when I was growing up in El Paso, Texas. It's the furthest westernmost county out of 254 in Texas, the only one in the Mountain Time Zone, and for a kid who was hooked on rock and roll and punk rock in particular. Not enough punk rock bands stocked in El Paso. I read Maximum Rock and Roll every month. And I would see the tour schedule for the bands. They play in Tucson on Tuesday. They play in Austin on Thursday. I knew they had to stop in El Paso. Why wouldn't they play at Wild Hairs or Sound Seas or even the Tap downtown? So I wanted to get out of El Paso. I wanted to go where the action and the energy was. Was lucky enough to be able to go to school in New York City through student loans and grants and a work-study job and the loans that my parents took out on my behalf. To their everlasting disappointment, given the sacrifice that they made, they found out that their son was an English major. Why do you want to read books and tell stories when you can become an engineer or an accountant or a doctor or an attorney? Do something with this education that we're all sacrificing so much for. But I knew that I would never, ever come back to El Paso, Texas. I had left it behind. 1998, I'm on a subway train commuting to my job in the Bronx from my home in Brooklyn. 1 hour commute each way, pressed up against the subway glass, sweating, thinking, I don't have to do this. I can go back home, be close to my family, eat the world's best Mexican food. No offense to Delicias and Diego. Be with my friends, be in the Chihuahuan Desert, be in the Rocky Mountains, which is where we are, be part of this international city. I was called to come back home, and what I found is that I had grown up in an embarrassment of riches in El Paso, Texas. The most beautiful people, the most profoundly positive community that I could have imagined. Stories that had not been told that I wanted to tell. We started an online newspaper, Stanton Street, to tell the stories of El Paso and of Ciudad Juarez. Later, in a brilliant stroke of genius, just as print newspapers were in decline, I started a print newspaper in El Paso, Texas. It lasted all of about 6 months before we bankrupted the operation. The world was going in a different direction. But that desire to tell our story, to help shape that story, led me to run for city council, where I served in a nonpartisan position, neither a Democrat nor a Republican, just an El Pasoan, getting after it with my fellow El Pasoans, a community that was so physically and politically removed from centers of power. We were left to our own devices. It was in our own hands to make our future, and we did. We ensured that we rewrote the subdivision code, turned around our mass transit system, protected our open spaces because once developed, they were not coming back. Made sure that an economy that was based on how cheap you could pay people, and the bottom fell out of that in 1994 with NAFTA, was transitioned into an economy that valued talent and genius in whatever form or capacity it comes. Was elected to serve my community in Congress for 6 years, every single one of them in the minority party. The only way to get anything done and be able to hold my head up high in a meeting like this back in El Paso was to find that Republican colleague with whom we could get the legislation, the proposal across the line, signed by the president, whether that was Obama or whether that was Trump. So expanding mental health care for veterans at a time that they're taking their lives at the rate of 20 a day, every single day in this country. 16 of those 20 unable, or for whatever reason, unwilling to go to the VA, maybe because of the length of the lines that they waited to get that care. 16 of 20 unable to get the care that they earned, that they deserved, by putting their life on the line for this country. We found that Republican colleague with whom we could work, with whom we could compromise, with whom we could pass that legislation in the House, in the Senate, and get it signed by this president, a man with whom I agree on almost nothing. But we found enough common ground and common cause for those who had served the common interest of this country to get it accomplished. Protecting public spaces in El Paso, investing in our ports of entry that connect us to the rest of the world, that facilitate the trade that originates here in Iowa, that connects farmers to markets all over the world, as well as keeping us safe and secure by knowing who and what is coming into this country, I had to partner with Republicans, and so I did, and we were able to get things done, make them better, not perfect, not great yet, but better than what they were before. When we campaigned for the United States Senate in the state of Texas, a state written off as too red to even compete in, I went to every single one of the 254 counties of that state. It did not matter how red or how rural, how blue or how urban. If you're important to me, you count, so I'm going to show up, I'm going to listen, I'm going to learn, and I did. King County, not the reddest county in Texas, the reddest county in the United States of America, voted for Donald Trump 96% in the last election, and yet every bit as deserving of our respect, of being heard, of being listened to, of being fought for, of being served. And so we showed up in King County, and we learned what was on their minds. I have no hope of serving those residents if I have not shown up first to find out what's most important to them. And all across Texas, I found a story similar to mine in El Paso. Communities that were not listened to, that were forgotten, that were left behind, that were taking matters into their own hands to ensure their future. And a reason for their kids and their grandkids to stay or move back if they had already left. That's where I find the ingenuity of America right now. Not in Congress, not in Washington, D.C., not in the White House, but in communities who understand their vitality and their future is at stake, and they're going to do everything within their power to make it a brighter one. And though we lost that Senate race in Texas by 2.6%, we got to be part of a transformation of our democracy in that state. A state that had ranked 50th in voter turnout to that point, saw a 500% increase in voter turnout amongst young people. We were able to attract the votes of Republicans and independents, expand the number of Democrats who participated. 2 new members of Congress, both Democrats, elected in what were thought to be safe Republican districts. The composition of the state legislature has now been changed, and in Houston, Texas, our largest city and the most diverse city in the United States of America, 17 African American women just won judicial positions in that community, literally changing the face of criminal justice in that community, by extension the state, and by extension the country. That's the way that we are running for president now, showing up everywhere, listening to learn from those whom I hope to serve. Now, if that's the issue of healthcare, making sure that we can all afford our prescriptions, we can afford our premiums, our deductibles, that we can take our child to a therapist, that we can afford to see a doctor, that we're not consumed by diabetes in the year 2019, we are able to meet the challenge of a maternal mortality crisis 3 times as deadly for women of color, or we confront the fact that one of the largest providers of mental health care services in our communities today is the county jail system in our communities today. Those with schizophrenia and bipolar disorder and depression literally getting arrested on purpose to get the care that they can find in no other place at exponentially more expensive rates than if we just provided preventative, consistent care up front. So universal, guaranteed, high-quality health care is informed by the stories of people like you and me from all over this country who know that we can do far better than we are doing today. When it comes to an economy that works for all, meeting school teachers and educators who are working 2 and 3 jobs just to make ends meet, though they have the most important job in front of them, that child whose lifelong love of learning, once unlocked, will make them unstoppable, will make this country unbeatable. I want one job to be enough for every American who's working full time, certainly for those educators. I want every kid, every family to be able to depend on a world-class pre-K through 12 public education system. Upon graduation, I want those 18-year-olds to be career ready for a job that provides purpose and function and dignity in their lives and pays a real paycheck. And that can be through a union and an apprenticeship and the ability to learn a trade or a skill or a discipline that will allow you to command that living wage for the rest of your life. It might be the ability to go to college or community college, free for community college, debt-free for higher education, a small investment to make in people will produce a return in dividends that far outweigh the initial cost for this country. making sure that rural communities are lifted up by listening to those same rural communities. The answers are here right now. The onus is on me to listen, to learn, and to reflect that in the way in which we campaign, in the way in which we serve together. I've already learned so much, whether traveling in rural Texas, going to a community like Silverton. 50% of rural Texas unable to reliably get online because we haven't made the investment in the infrastructure of broadband internet. Those in rural Texas tell me, try getting a job, finishing your education, starting a business, getting what you grow to market without the internet. And as I'm talking about making that investment, a gentleman stands up, says, I was in first grade in 1937 when then Congressman LBJ, then President FDR, invested in, partnered with us. No handouts, no sympathy, no pity for Silverton, Texas, but they knew that we had no electricity. And I could not read by electric light the night before the first day of first grade, just like the kids in Chicago could, or Tokyo, or London. And so FDR, LBJ, our party, partnered with the co-op in our community with the Rural Electrification Administration, and all of a sudden, we mattered just as much as anyone else. And he said, by the way, from that day forward, my dad was a yellow dog Democrat. When we show up for people, when we listen to people, when we deliver for people, when we partner with people, based on the solutions that they come up with in their own communities, and we've earned their trust and their support to meet even greater challenges. Listening to the farmers in Iowa who ask one simple thing: I just want to be able to make a profit. I want to make sure that the food that I grow, the fiber that we raise, it feeds and clothes not just this country, but so much of the rest of the world, is not undermined by our policies or the concentration of power and wealth and privilege at an unprecedented scale and level that we are seeing today. I want to make sure that I do my part to combat climate change, ensure that there are incentives to plant cover crops and precision farming and tilling, make sure that we're capturing more of that carbon out of the air so that we can get to net zero greenhouse gas emissions as soon as possible. Farmers told me that they have been able to, at least in part, free themselves from the whims of commodity markets by adding value to what they grow, giving their kids a reason to come back, just like we were looking for it in El Paso, Texas, to work on that farm instead of selling that farm and subdividing it into more housing, making sure that we find a way to create the high-wage, high-skill, high-value jobs that we need in every part of America. The ability not only to work one job, which should be enough, but to work that one job where you live, where you grew up, so you can take care of yourself, your kids, but also your parents and your community. We're going to make sure we meet this challenge of an economy that works too well for too few and not well enough for too many. Everyone must be included. Rural America, urban America, Republicans and Democrats, and those who've either been locked out of their democracy or become so disgruntled, disenchanted, that they've disconnected from the process altogether. A vibrant democracy that brings every single one of us in through a new voter rights bill, through ending gerrymandering where members of Congress choose their own voters instead of the other way around, taking out big, unaccountable PAC money and special interest funds, and then making sure that we have same-day and automatic voter registration in every part of this country. If you pair that political democracy with a true economic democracy, this concentration of wealth and power broken up, opportunities shared with all, women paid what men are paid for the same job, providing the same value and the same work. No discrimination based on your sexual orientation, your race, or any other difference that does not matter. Making sure that no one is working 2 or 3 jobs just to make ends meet. This begins to repair some of the damage done and to open up more opportunity for all. And it is the only way that we are going to meet the historic set of challenges that we have before us, whether that's healthcare, whether it's the economy, whether it's the fact that we waited more than 30 years to answer the question that Diego posed to me at Delicias. Why don't we do what is in the self-interest and the best traditions of this country? Free every dreamer more than 1 million strong from any fear of deportation by making them U.S. citizens here in a country that they have chosen and continue to show back to. And for those who understand and believe the scientists, 300 years, Gassi, after the Enlightenment, 1 degree Celsius is how much we have warmed just since 1980 over pre-industrial revolution levels. Our own inaction, our own excesses, our own emissions are to cause the flooding of the Missouri River, historic levels of Missouri River Basin runoff, 4 times average, and the greatest levels that we have seen since we've been keeping records in this country. And it's not unique to this part of the world. Houston, Texas, in my home state, 58 inches of rain fell from the sky in 2017. That's the landfall record for as long as we've been keeping records in North America. And it was the 3rd 500-year flood in just the last 5 years. Houston, Texas should be good for 1,500 years, but they're not. Because those scientists say that on this trajectory, this course that we're on today, those floods, your floods, the fires in California, the droughts through which our farmers persist, will no longer be livable in the future for our kids and for our grandkids. But those same scientists say there are 10 years, más o menos, left to us right now to do the right thing. When our kids and grandkids, the people of the future, look back on this moment and to the people of 2019, we cannot be found wanting. We will have to have harnessed everything that we got to this democracy, the political will of our fellow Americans, despite the differences, damn the differences. We're going to make sure that we harness a conscientious capitalism, the ingenuity, the innovation, the creativity that comes from that to make sure that we've done our part, and then once again, take our place on the world stage as the indispensable country, convening the other nations of the world to do what none of us could do on our own, but what we can only do together. Only in that way we confront and overcome these challenges together, all of us. That's why I'm running to serve you as the President of the United States of America. Running for everyone, everywhere, and every single part of this country. And so I'm so grateful to you for having us out here today, looking forward to answering your questions, hearing what's on your mind, having the benefit of your wisdom, your experience, and your suggestions. Thank you for having us out. Very grateful. Cynthia right here has got a microphone. If you would like, okay. And then there's a gentleman right back here.
Okay, you're first.
Hi, I taught for years in a private school. My kids went to a private school. They ended up graduating from a public school, and then 2 of my 3 went on to a private college and graduated. Can you tell us a little bit about where your wife works, where your kids went to school, and maybe some plans for education?
Yeah, thank you. So my 3 kids, Ulysses, who's 12 in the 6th grade, Molly, who's 10 in the 5th grade, Henry, who's 8 in the 2nd grade, all go to world-class public schools in El Paso. Mesita Elementary, the same school I went to. Only an interesting difference, in my generation, when I was in 5th grade, there was a Spanish class. It's 45 minutes a day, 5 days a week. In my parents' generation, were you to speak Spanish in the halls of Mesita, you would be disciplined. If you persisted, you'd be suspended. And if you kept it up, you'd be expelled. Now at Mesita Elementary, through the dual language Connecting Worlds program, Ulysses and Molly and Henry, they're learning math in English today. They're learning math in Spanish tomorrow. They're thinking, they're learning, they're speaking, they're writing. They're existing in both worlds, in both languages, making the most of who we are. No shame, but a ton of pride. And that innovation is thanks to public school educators who came up with the ideas, implemented the curriculum, and helped to distinguish El Paso as a result. You asked where my wife works. She works with a civic organization comprised of members of the community who are trying to improve public education at traditional public schools and exemplary public schools like Mesita, as well as charter schools in our community. Public charter schools, to be sure, not private charter schools, not for-profit charter schools. So she's intent on making sure that we offer every family in our community the best opportunity to advance, to get ahead, to make sure that we make the most of who we are in El Paso, Texas. And he said ideas about public schools. Look, it starts with paying our educators what they are worth, their true value. I want them to have just one job and be able to focus on that. I want to make sure that we attract the next generation of public school educators. I want to acknowledge that in many of our smaller towns especially, the independent school district is the largest employer. And if we turn our public tax dollars into vouchers, as our current Secretary of Education wishes to do, and send them to other schools, we're going to undermine the backbone of much of America, certainly of rural America. So I want to make sure that we're all doing our part to protect those public schools. Thank you. Cynthia, how's the coffee here?
Oh, it's up there.
It's up
Very
there.
good, yes.
Well, Beto, and want to move to the international scene for a moment. And very much dismayed that the United States is withdrawing from the international agreements about the two-state solution in Israel and Palestine. And taking concern that we totally abandoned concern for the Palestinian people. When you become president, how did you address this?
Question is about the United States withdrawing from its leadership on a two-state solution for the people of Israel and for the Palestinians in the West Bank and in the Gaza Strip. The two-state solution is in the security interest not just of the United States, not just of Israel, but of that region. And without U.S. leadership, it absolutely will not be achieved. Again, we used to distinguish ourselves by being the indispensable nation. Convening countries that otherwise could not come together. This is absolutely a time for us to do that and not a time to withdraw. This is not a time to be the one country out of 194 on the face of the planet that is withdrawn from the Paris Climate Agreement, which in and of itself would not have been sufficient to reach our targets to prevent this planet from cooking another degree Celsius, and yet was a right step in the right direction. We took a big step back in the wrong direction. When I was formally announcing my candidacy on Saturday in El Paso, Texas, 4 blocks from where we were announcing, there were children and men and women from Central America who were penned up in a cage under a bridge, a makeshift cage, behind barbed wire. Reminiscent of kids kept in cages who were separated from their parents after they had traveled 2,000 miles by foot and atop a train known as the Beast, La Bestia, not inside on the seats, mind you, on top of the train, risking their lives to save the lives of their kids, doing exactly what you would do if faced with the same set of circumstances, and this was the only way to save the life of your baby girl or your baby boy. It's not just how we treat those who are desperate, who are vulnerable, who come to this country of immigrants and asylum seekers and refuge, seeking salvation and refuge. It's also about how we meet this challenge over the long term and the foreign policy that you raised in the United States of America. We've been building a fortress around this country, a moat around the United States. We've turned our backs on our traditional allies, alliances forged in shared sacrifice, going back 80 years to World War II and in some preceding that great conflict. We're trying to go it alone against real challenges like China, who manipulates their currency. Don't steal on this market. I want us to win those trade wars. I want us to win our battles, but when have we ever gone to war alone, without allies or friends? And that's precisely what we're doing. And it's the farmer here in Iowa, the rancher in Texas, who's taken it on the chin for a trade war that was foolish to begin with, cannot be won without allies, and will sacrifice those who are providing the national security and food security of this country. Here's what I'd like to do. Let's renew those friendships and alliances, strengthen them so that we can meet any challenge or threat, be it North Korea, be it Iran, be it China. Let's also prioritize again this hemisphere, those people to whom we are connected literally by land, by culture, by family connections, by history. Let it not be a surprise when tens of thousands of kids travel 2,000 miles and show up at our front door at the Texas-Mexico border asking for help. Now, we can meet them with open arms, we can meet them with a wall, we can meet them with cages, but we can also meet that challenge in those countries of origin, in Guatemala, in Honduras, in El Salvador, by investing in civil society, in the reforms necessary so that no one feels compelled to leave and make that dangerous journey in the first place. I want to make sure that we do everything we can while we still can. It's good not just for those who live there, it's great for the United States of America. And I want to make sure that we have a foreign policy that matches our values and our interests. Thank you, sir.
Good morning, my name is Steve Bach, and I traveled 2.5 hours to Minnesota through the fog just to meet you.
Thank you for being here.
And my Texas connection is my oldest boy was one time stationed at Fort Sam Houston.
Right on.
I'm 56. Would you be willing to get rid of the federal tax on Social Security? Please. We worked hard enough.
Absolutely.
Thank you. That's it. Good.
Steve, thank you for making the trip and driving through the fog. So Social Security, as you probably know, is along the current actuarial trajectory, is not going to be able to make 100% of its obligation to you and others who paid in their entire life as soon as the 2030s, a little more than a decade away. And now we can do things, we can tinker with the age at which you can retire and receive that earned benefit that, as you said, you paid into your entire life. We can shrink what we pay out to people, or we can do the following, especially given the historic divide in wealth and income in this country right now. We can ask those who make more to pay more in, because right now, I think at $129,000, you pay into the Social Security tax fund. Every penny, every dime, every $1,000, every $1 million, every $1 billion more that you make over that is not taxed. It does not go in. If we raise that arbitrary cap on what you pay into the Social Security trust fund, we're going to be able to ensure the viability of that compact for you, for my generation, for every generation that follows well into the next century. So I think that is the most sound way to address our concerns about Social Security. Thank you for asking.
Thank you, sir.
I didn't answer your question.
With the crippling student loan debt that is hurting all of young people, keeping young people from starting families, from buying homes, exiting towns like Storm Lake, Alta Aurelia in search of a salary that will cover those loans. What are your plans to help us have that?
Thanks for the question. I talked a little bit about El Paso, Texas, and my desire to flee my hometown, get away from my folks, experience, a different life, and then how I was drawn back to El Paso. What I have heard from those who went to El Paso High at the same time that I did, who went to Mesita Elementary at the same time that I did, is in some cases they want to come back to El Paso as well, but they cannot afford to do that. They're not going to be able to earn enough to pay the mortgage, to put food on the table, to meet the co-pay or deductible on their insurance, and to pay the note on their student loan debt. Student loan debt is the one kind of debt you will never shake until you have paid it off or until you are in the grave. No joke, we were in Houston, Texas, and I met a woman, my mom's age, who told me that her mother, who she was going to visit in hospice care, is still paying down her student loan debt at the end of her life. $1.5 trillion in outstanding student loan debt. That's more than all the credit card debt that we racked up in this country combined. And we add to it every day $40,000 per graduating college senior. That's the average on your back when you're graduating right now. So first order of business, stop digging the hole, or stop adding to that debt. I mentioned earlier, free community college. Let's make sure that you can get that associate's degree. In some cases, while you are still in high school. You have early college high schools in El Paso. You may have them here in Storm Lake. That's awesome. So without taking on a dime of debt at 18 years old, graduate with a high school diploma and an associate's degree. In Roscoe, Texas, home of the Plow Boys and the Plow Girls, 90% of those students graduate with an associate's degree, some of them with the remote FAA pilot's license at 18 to fly the drone, to do the maintenance inspections on the wind turbines that define the view in Roscoe, Texas. High wage, high skill, in demand jobs right now. Public serving, publicly funded, public facing four-year universities. I want you to be able to attend those without taking on debt as well. And then if you have accrued that debt, let's make sure that we give you a reason to move back to Storm Lake or Wichita Falls in Texas or in El Paso. I was meeting with the Republican mayor in Wichita Falls, Steven Sapayan, an amazing guy, and I said, what is your one challenge, Mayor? And he said, I cannot get young people to move back to this town. And I said, what about this? What if we forgave the student loan debt to these young people who want to move back if they work at the VA? 45,000 positions short at the VA right now. Wait times to see a provider for your PTSD, TBI, military sexual trauma, measured in days, weeks, sometimes months or years. If you're willing to care for one of those who stood up and put their lives on the line for this country, let's wipe clean that debt. If you're willing to teach school or work in a support staff role in public education in a town that is desperate for that talent, let's wipe clean that debt. At a minimum, let's allow you to refinance the debt that you hold at a lower rate. 10% default is what I'm seeing right now across this country. So young people already in a tough place starting out in life with this $40,000 backpack on their back. Some are literally getting crushed into the ground right now. We, the wealthiest, the most powerful country on the face of the planet, should be able to understand that we both have the capacity to do this, and it is in our self-interest to ensure that more of our fellow Americans get the education and training necessary to deliver for their fellow Americans. Thank you for the question. Appreciate it.
I have time for 2 more.
Hi.
Hello. Quería hacerle una pregunta. Mire, yo estoy por renovar mi residencia otra vez, pero la verdad tengo temor porque dice que van a criminalizar la gente que ha pedido estampillas, Medicare, y pues yo la verdad las agarré un tiempo porque mi hijo, el que es nacido aquí en los Estados Unidos, no tenía seguro médico. Entonces padecía de convulsiones, lo tenía que estar llevando cada rato al hospital, ¿verdad? Y los costos son muy caros. Entonces me dijeron que yo podía aplicar para que él tuviera el Medicaid. De ahí para acá, entonces tuve otro problema, que tengo mi otro hijo con deficiencia renal. Entonces los gastos son muy carísimos. Y pues yo soy sola y por lo más que estuve tratando de sacar adelante los gastos, tuve que agarrar ayuda financiera, el Medicare, y no sé si eso me va a afectar para ahora que yo vaya a presentar para mi renovación de mi permiso y él se quiere hacer ciudadano americano y no sabemos qué consecuencia vaya a tener eso.
Gracias para la pregunta y quiero responder que primero, si queremos asegurar nuestras comunidades, es importante que la gente que vive adentro de nuestras comunidades no viven en miedo de las autoridades, de la capacidad de obtener salud y cuidado para sus hijos, para su familia. Necesitamos tratar a cada persona con respeto y dignidad y así podemos asegurar nuestras comunidades. Si somos serios en este tema, también necesitamos seguir con el trabajo de reformar nuestras leyes de migración para que familias puedan reunir, quedar aquí, contribuir al éxito de Storm Lake, también de Iowa, también de los Estados Unidos. Esta es la historia de este país. Y al respecto de Medicaid, necesitamos mejorar ese programa para todos y en una manera pública, no como hicieron aquí en Iowa, de una manera privada. Necesitamos que cada persona que está trabajando y contribuyendo al éxito de su comunidad, de su familia, de la economía, puede obtener los beneficios que necesitan para tener la salud, para trabajar, para ir a la escuela, para crecer con su familia. Yo quiero representar y servir cada persona sin respeto, independiente de los cuantas generaciones que están aquí adentro de los Estados Unidos o afuera de los Estados Unidos, independiente de su género, de su raza, de las diferencias que no me importan en este momento tan importante para el futuro del país. Yo quiero que cada persona adentro de nuestras comunidades pueda contribuir a su máximo potencia. Y con estas políticas, yo pienso que podemos hacer con Medicaid, también con la reforma migratoria, también con el respeto que necesitamos dar a cada miembro de nuestra comunidad. Gracias por estar aquí con nosotros. Gracias. There we go.
Hello, my name is Damunta Hutchins, and I'm an immigrant from Poland, from communist oppression. I lived through the terrors of Hitler and Stalin, and I am living through the terrors of this Orange Julius now. Sir, it is a noble enterprise. I have two questions actually. What idea or what words spurred you to throw yourself at this novel enterprise? And also, when you follow the footsteps of Jack Kennedy and get there, are you going to choose a woman as your vice president?
First of all, I'm grateful that you're here, and grateful that you also shared your personal story. It is as relevant as it has ever been right now. You know, a president who describes Mexican immigrants as rapists and criminals, asylum seekers as animals and an infestation, wants to ban the travel of all people of one religion. When in Western history have we had something like that? Somebody who calls Nazis and Klansmen and white supremacists very fine people. It's not just the rhetoric and the words, it's the policies that follow. Those kids in cages, those people who were trapped behind the cyclone fencing and barbed wire. In my hometown of El Paso, a city that is safe because it is a city of immigrants and asylum seekers. So we really have our work cut out for us. But if we descend into that ugliness, that pettiness, that meanness, those kinds of personal attacks, not only do I think we won't be able to win against somebody who's a master in it, but we will fail to bring the country together around the really big challenges that we face. And you mentioned JFK and RFK. Part of the reason those Kennedy brothers still appeal to us and resonate more than 50 years after RFK was murdered is because they spoke to our aspirations and our ambitions. Who we could be if we could come together. Whether it was the moonshot of JFK, or whether it was RFK going to communities that had never been visited, bringing into the conversation people who had been neglected, denied, suppressed, segregated, and kept down, bringing us together to do something that we could not do on our own. And that inspiration animates so much of this campaign. You asked what caused Amy and me to make this decision. Ultimately, it was our kids. It was Ulysses and Molly and Henry. It's their judgment that I fear. When they look back on us 20, 30 years from now, 2019, all of this was going on and you still had time to act. What did you do? And that accounting, that reckoning is always in my head. And though it's hard not to be with them right now, and it's hard to get the emails I just read this morning from Amy about the night that she had with those kids and some of the things that she's doing on her own right now without my help. I think we both understand that this is a very, very small sacrifice for your works to make, given what others are already sacrificing in this country, men and women who are deployed right now in wars that have gone on for 17, 27 years in Afghanistan and Iraq, sacrifices that others will have to endure if we do not get this right at this moment. And so I want to make sure that I've done everything I humanly can to make sure that this country achieves its promise. And lastly, to your ultimate point, yes, if we secure the nomination, if I have the opportunity and honor to serve you as president, it will be a cabinet that looks like, reflects the genius, the diversity of this country. And absolutely, women will play a leading role in that cabinet. So thank you. Thank you. That was the last question. Storm Lake, thank you for having us out. We are very, very, very grateful. Thank you for allowing us to be here.